The Paul Leslie Hour, helping people tell their stories. And now, your host, Paul Leslie.
Hey, it's me. Ladies and gentlemen, we are joined by a film and television director and producer. Michael Steed has worked on such shows as PBS's The Mind of a Chef, which was a James Beard Award winner, CNN's Anthony Bordain Parts Unknown, which won an Emmy. He's created content for the Travel Channel, A&E, Bravo, Netflix. He's with the production company 0.0, and most recently, he directed season 2 of My Next Guest Needs No Introduction with David Letterman. He was at every shoot in the theaters, on location, and it's a great pleasure to welcome Michael Steed. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, Paul. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's our honor. Well, I think most stories are best from the beginning. Can you give us a little bit of background on where you're from?
Well, I grew up in Miami and sort of slowly made my way out of Florida. Ended up in Atlanta for school at Georgia State University, and where I sort of fell in love with documentary film work. You know, and New York City was always on my radar since childhood. So, you know, about 20 years ago, I moved up here to pursue, film and television career.
I am just a couple of miles at the moment from Georgia State University, and I thought it would be
right.
Yeah, I thought it would be cool to explore your Georgia connection. What are your memories from your time in the Big A?
Well, Atlanta is a great city. You know, I was there in the 90s, so the sort of music and art and film scene was fantastic. So, a lot of my closest friends come from that time. And, it's where I really developed, my love of film and documentary work. I worked at a video store that's now closed called Movies Worth Seeing. So people in Atlanta will certainly know what that is. And, it's a type of independent video rental store that, where 4 or 5 of us worked and we could just explore and buy whatever we wanted. So we were able to really, sort of expand our sort of understanding and viewing of films more so than I ever got in school. So it was there where I really kind of, fell in love and sort of really learned the ins and outs of movie making.
That's really interesting to me. Now, tell me, you had access to unlimited movies. I know because I had a similar job, and I'm hoping you can tell us about some of the movies that have made a lasting impression on you.
Well, wow, that's a big question, right? So it really depends on what we're, which genre we're talking about. But, within documentary work, it ranges from, all the Les Blanc docs, which really had a big influence on me, just sort of pure verite and, shot on film and just amazing, quirky sort of subject matters. His film, A Burden of Dreams, which is a film that he documented the making of Fitzcarraldo, is probably one of my all-time favorite documentaries. So there's that. And then, we could also come across something like Heavy Metal Parking Lot, which was just like this sort of underground public access thing that someone made out of Washington, D.C. and, be able to talk to that director and bring it to Movies We're Seeing and, have people watch that. So those, wow, there's just so many that we were able to sort of explore there, Yeah, I mean, it was also, what else? Let me think. That's such a big question. I really have to just sort of pause for a moment and really think about that, because it was the mid-90s. And I think, there's this time when a few movies came out that just kind of changed my life, which is, it's a series of films. It's like Jim Jarmusch's Dead Man, Todd Haynes' Safe, Ang Lee's The Ice Storm, and Adam Ogoyan's The Sweet Hereafter. And those films sort of really embrace quiet and silence in a way that I hadn't seen, or at least hadn't been exposed to. Yeah, it wasn't, and it's because of that place, Movies We're Seeing, that really, I was able to really, to watch those films and be inspired by them. And so I would say, those are, if you need to know my sort of core aesthetics, those you can probably watch those movies and understand them.
And as I was mentioning in the introduction there, a lot of the things that you've created have had a food or a culinary connection to it. How did that come about?
Random. I mean, it's just, sort of pure luck. And, before I came to 0.0, I was doing a show called The First 48, which was on A&E and may still be on A&E, and I'm not sure, and where we follow, sort of it being embedded with homicide detectives around the country. And I just was randomly at a party somewhere, and someone that was running Tony's show, the showrunner, said, oh, what are you doing? And, I may have a slot open for a show. And I didn't even know who Anthony Bordain was. And I said, that's great. I'd love to sort of, why not go from homicides to food and travel? It seemed like a much sort of, it was a way to sort of clean my palate, hanging around murder investigators for a few years can really do that to you. So she called me and said, we have a couple shows that we'd like you to direct. So I started doing that. And, I wasn't like this super foodie or anything, but I certainly became, sort of ensconced in that world pretty quickly.
On the note of Anthony Bourdain, when you think about him, what comes to your mind?
Original. Someone, they sort of broke the mold with Tony. And, he's been a huge influence on my life. And I feel extremely lucky and blessed to have worked with him for as long as I did.
What was he like when you got to know him?
Oh, what was he like? Sharp, deep understanding and film knowledge that I had never sort of experienced, and just open to creative ideas, which, is a rare sort of combination to have someone with that much talent and abilities also be open to, any and all ideas that you would come to the table with. So just a really genuine dude. I really liked him.
You said a moment ago that you became a foodie as a result of this. Could you tell us the best restaurant you've ever been to?
I just want to say the word foodie is kind of, at this point, just, it's almost derogatory, but at least in my world. The best restaurant I've ever been to, eating on the streets of Tijuana is better than any restaurant that I've ever been to. So it's really situational. You know what I mean? I've been to super fancy restaurants that people would say, oh, that's the best restaurant in the world. And it was delicious. But, eating and, food in general is really about, who you're with, what's the situation. So it really depends on that. But truly, eating on the streets of Tijuana can be just as glorious and amazing as eating at Noma or, any of the other sort of high-end, restaurants that people generally think of as, the best food in the world.
That's a really, really good point. And I also have to agree with you about the term foodie. I don't,
Yes.
I've had people call me that, and I usually say something like, what are you saying? I'm chubby?
It's just, at this point, it's just like, I don't know. I don't know how to even, what it means at this point. I love eating food. I love good company. And I really respect and appreciate the craft,
I wanted to dive into the Letterman stuff. I've watched this series, the first season, of course, and I watched this second season, and I've tried to watch it very, very carefully. It's really interesting, very well done. So how did you get a chance to do this?
Well, I don't know exactly how it came to ZPZ. I'm kind of above my pay grade, but when they did decide to, come to us to direct or produce the second season, Chris and Lydia, who own the company here, decided that I would be a good fit. I have, and why they decided I was a good fit, you'd have to ask them. But I've worked a long time, created some shows here, and I think they thought I would be able to do it. And I feel great that they did, because I really had a great time doing it.
Was there any particular reason that this season started with Kanye West?
Well, I mean, it's not the first one that we shot, but coming out of the gate with Kanye seems self-evident. It's he people are extremely interested in what he has to say, and they didn't know what to expect. I suppose that the audience wouldn't have known what to expect. We certainly did not. And, you start with someone like Kanye, right? I mean, he's compelling in whether or not you like him or you love his music or you're angry at him for wearing the hat, and all of that sort of stuff. It's still people are going to watch. People are going to watch.
Was there anything that surprised you about Kanye West?
Oh, anything surprised me? Well, yeah. I mean, you have this. There's the image, that certainly his controversies in the last couple of years. So, just he, at least in person, and outside of all of the sort of controversy with Trump and all the other sort of nonsense that sort of surrounds all of that, he's just a normal sort of down-to-earth person, and treated us just, how do I say it? He treated us like normal people. I don't know if that sounds kind of weird, but, he just is a normal down-to-earth person who seems to have issues that he's dealing with just like anyone else. I mean, really, it just sort of reminded me that, to not sort of push your own sort of narratives on people that you don't know, and that ultimately we don't know anybody. And, what we learned in the interview, and you saw that on the show, is that, he's dealing with his own issues, and, there's empathy there for that, outside of what your feelings are on his politics or, some of his comments. There's someone there that, has issues that, he seems to be confronting, and how the best he can.
I have to say, I started out watching that episode, and I didn't know what to think. I thought I wouldn't like Kanye West, and he came across as very, as you said, down to earth.
And I mean, that's what him and Kim, we were in their home. There was no, sort of the whole sort of reality TV-ness of it that people, that where the part that people know, you quickly see that is a projection, and that, in their home, they're just, they got kids, they're, a husband and wife, they're dealing with, what all people in their homes are dealing with to some degree. Obviously they have resources that, a lot of people don't, but outside of all that, they're just, people trying to make it.
At a certain point in the interview, Dave and Kanye talk about what it means to be cool. This is cool, that's not cool. How do you define cool?
I guess defining cool means you don't have to define cool. Again, I don't want to sound like I'm being coy or anything, but cool is just this nebulous idea. What's cool to me is certainly not going to be cool to someone who's 22. And what's cool to a 22-year-old might just be sort of uncool to me, or rehashing of ideas that I've already seen, or, it's just it's relative to your own sort of style and ideas and, aesthetic. So I don't have a clear definition of what cool is. I really don't. I wish being like a middle-aged dad, I guess I wish I had a better idea so I could, kind of come across as cooler than I am. But, it's like What is cool, man? You should ask someone who's 22 living in Williamsburg, and they might be able to tell you better than I can. That's for sure.
Something that was also interesting was the worship service, the Sunday service. What was that like to film?
It was, it was fantastic. If what people can't really argue against is Kanye's, artistic abilities and him as a musician and, him sort of pushing the envelope. He's definitely changed, the genre of hip hop in a lot of ways. And then to be in where he's, he told Dave that, that he's just sort of throwing paint on the canvas at this point, so we saw it in its early stages, and we saw it in like a very personal, in the personal setting, which I think is what he was really wanting it to be. Listen, when you have a choir singing in that sort of space, it's powerful. So it was a joyous experience, and then filming it, we went in with, our regular cameras, and Kanye's like, that's going to sort of blow the vibe. So all of us just took out our phones and recorded it with iPhones and, got the mastered audio and made the scene that you guys see there in the show. It was, from a filmmaking standpoint, it's like, a situation comes up, you're like, oh, what's the solution? We'll shoot it on phones. It's still going to be personal. It's still going to be really cool. And it's going to be super intimate. And that's how it came across. It was really powerful. I know that he played like Coachella or something like a few months later, and it didn't quite have the impact, or at least that's what people were saying, online. That I think the space itself was critical in that, his whole use of and being inspired by James Turrell and the light and his whole ideas. But you're seeing, we were involved in a process, and I'm curious how it ends up at the end, what we saw sort of makes it to the final idea. But it was great. And Dave just loved it. He was really, truly, and honestly inspired, and kind of awestruck at the power of it. Music is magic in that way sometimes.
Absolutely. The Ellen DeGeneres episode, something that occurred to me when I was watching it is, wow, you have two of the great broadcasters of our time on one stage, really just bringing them together.
Yeah, what can I say about that? It's just kind of like, what I do in that situation is you're like, you open the door, you put them on stage, and you let them do their thing. There's not too much you need to tell either one of them in that situation. They're both great, amazing storytellers. They're two people just that are, icons and masters at their, what they do. And I think it was evident not just in the final cut of the show, but as it's happening, you're just like, okay, these guys are just, these two are just, amazing. The ability to sit on stage and have that sort of intimate conversation and, quick wit and callbacks and all of it just kind of happening in real time. So it was a rare treat for sure.
You just said intimate, and we won't spoil it completely for anyone who hasn't seen it, but it got very, very personal. Did you know that the interview would get as personal as it did?
I didn't. I knew that Dave was probably going to ask, some questions, but there was no telling what Ellen was going to reveal or felt comfortable revealing. It's not the type of show where we discussed a list of questions prior to, going out on stage. As it's happening, that's when, the guest is hearing the questions for the first time and answering however they're going to answer. So I don't think, I know that we didn't know how personal it would get, and I don't even think Ellen knew how personal it would get. But it was amazing. You're just kind of sitting, watching it happen in real time, and just awe that, again, that it's actually happening. deep and, really touching.
Absolutely. That was the word that was going through my head. It was very touching. Something she mentioned in the interview was she talked about criticism, like from the press, that kind of thing. And she said, I thought this was great. If you listen to the good reviews, logically you have to listen to the bad reviews too. So she just said, I don't read them. Did the reviews matter to you?
Do they matter? Listen, I read, I read reviews. I don't have a problem with bad reviews. I kind of like reading like social media reviews because, you're getting a more direct sort of response to someone who just watched it. So, if people love it, that makes me feel really good. If people don't like it, I guess it really depends on what they don't like. Sometimes I find, the people that don't, sort of give a negative review, I find some humor in it sometimes because they're just sort of off in their criticisms. But ultimately it doesn't matter, because if I enjoyed making it and I'm proud of what we made, what some critic or some person out there in the world personally thinks out of it, that's the risk you take of putting yourself out there creatively. It's not for everybody, and you're hoping that there's more people that like it than don't.
With the Tiffany Haddish episode, was that the first time that they had met?
It is. Yes, it was the first time they met. It was great.
Yeah, it's really incredible. And I think Dave's technique as an interviewer really came out. His ability to get someone to open up like that. How do you think it is, or why is Dave so good at getting people to talk?
Well, he's Dave Letterman. He's been doing it for a really long time, and now he can do it on his own terms. There's no one's there, sort of to promote a show or sell a book or anything like that. It's just a conversation. And having now talked to Dave in sort of less formal settings, like in meetings and just sort of in rooms, he's just funny and really good. What can I say about David Letterman, really, and his skill set? It's kind of, there's 30 years of proof of his abilities. And then also, there's that, but then there's Tiffany, who is magnetic and is just a powerhouse and hilarious and just as quick as Dave is up there. So when you have someone sitting across from you of her caliber and her ability to just have fun and open up and let it all out there, then it certainly probably made Dave's job that much easier.
It seems like David Letterman always has a rapport with anyone who has done stand-up comedy. And when he was talking to Tiffany Haddish, he was kind of being self-deprecating about his own abilities as a comedian. But I thought it was really interesting watching and hearing two comedians talk about, like, kind of getting nerdy about it for a little bit, talking about the history of comedy. That was really interesting to me.
Yeah, and I think it kind of took Dave by surprise of how much Tiffany actually not just knew, but was, a part of and friends with old friends of his. And so, yeah, I have that. I don't come from the comedy world, but I certainly can nerd out on comedy history. And yeah, if you're talking the history of comedy and comedians, Dave is certainly the person to talk to, or one of the people to talk to. And I remember the moment where Tiffany just sort of started talking about her influences, and Dave was really taken aback by how much of the history she really, really, truly knew and was inspired by. Yeah. So again, that's, they hadn't met each other prior to, and then, these revelations are coming on stage. So, it's just sort of unfolding in a really sort of natural way.
When David Letterman was introducing Lewis Hamilton, the race car driver, he was saying the name of this show is My Next Guest Needs No Introduction. And he said something to the effect of, but to a lot of you, you're going to need an introduction for this guy. And It's always been interesting to me. David Letterman always seems to especially shine with someone who is a little less famous than, say, like Tom Hanks or somebody like that. And I know that Dave loves racing. Was this a special choice for him?
Yeah, it was. Dave's love of racing is fairly well known at this point. And, Lewis Hamilton came up really early. And again, this show is different than what he did for 30 years. He gets to decide. And Lewis Hamilton is, like he said, may need a little bit of introduction, but only here in the States. Around the world, he's one of the most highly regarded and famous and well-paid athletes there is. So yeah, this one was definitely really special to Dave, and a lot of fun to produce. The field pieces were just, fantastic.
What was that like, seeing Dave interact with people out in public?
Well, interacting in public is one thing. I specifically for this, being on that racetrack, being at Silverstone, that was something he'd never done before, never been to that racetrack, had always wanted to go, and passively sort of mentioned that he'd love to drive it. And they were totally game, and him and Lewis really hit it off really well. Lewis is just an amazing sort of generous and funny and genuine person. So all of that stuff that you see happening, in the show, it's almost half of how it shows about half as much fun as they were actually having together. It's kind of hard to even capture the sort of joy that Dave was feeling there, but I think we did the best job we could. But yeah, that was, he's hilarious, and just, you see the look on his face when he comes out of that car at the end. It's giddy, happy. So, as someone who's directing these things, those are the moments you really want, where Dave is truly having a really, really good time. And he certainly had a really good time there. They would have driven for another 2 hours, except Lewis was literally seeing this year's car for the first time ever. So he actually had real work to do, and took out the time to sort of hang out with us as much as he could. So after seeing now how this season's going for Lewis, that car that we saw for the very first time has certainly been paying dividends for him.
The episode with Melinda Gates, what was the goal with that episode?
Again, it's just Dave's interest. Dave really was taken by Melinda's book, inspired by what her and the Gates Foundation are doing around the world, and wanted to sit down and talk to her. And it's his prerogative, and so that's what we did. So it's truly the sort of prime example of what separates his previous show and this one, where you can sit down and have a couple-hour conversation with someone that you really find inspiring, that he finds really inspiring. So we went out and made it happen.
Did you ever talk with Dave about what his overall vision with this program was? Do you know what it is he's trying to accomplish?
I don't. I've never had that conversation with him. I think the closest I can come to sort of answering that question is just what I was saying about Melinda. Here's this unique opportunity to sit down and talk to people that you have an interest in actually getting to know. And so much of television is, quick bites, and, you're promoting something, or you're selling a book, or there's that motivation of why someone's sitting across from you, whether it be a desk or two chairs, facing each other, that there's something else behind it. With this, it truly is just Dave's interests and people that he finds inspiring, that he wants to have a conversation with. And for me, I love the idea of slowing things down and letting people really have conversations. I think it's lacking, and I think who better to do that than David Letterman?
It's occurred to me when I watched these, because I have to say, there's been a lot of surprising moments. For anyone who hasn't seen this, you'll get to hear David Letterman say things you never thought that he would say, and you'll get to see him do things that you never thought that he would do.
I think he's certainly revealed more about himself than, in than on his previous show. I do know that, say with, Lewis Hamilton, he was really taken by that father-son relationship. And again, he's revealing quite a bit about himself and found that touching and compelling. And so, you learn a little bit about Dave and through some of these interviews. So it certainly, some of that comes through for sure. It feels more personal.
Mm-hmm.
The show overall is more personal in my opinion.
In the Melinda Gates interview, she talks about her work in India, and it was very, very touching. And something you mentioned to me in one of your emails was that you were in India recently. Can you tell us a little bit about that? I
can. We were shooting the field pieces for the Shahrukh Khan, which is not out yet. Please don't ask me like when that's coming out or how that's being released, because I don't know. But we did an interview with Shahrukh Khan, who's the world's most famous Bollywood actor, which also means he's probably the most famous actor in the world. And so we were there visiting with him and hanging out in Mumbai at the end of Ramadan and right when Eid was happening. So yeah, we were there to hang out with Shahrukh and hang out in India. And it was an intense and amazing experience. I don't know how much you know about Shahrukh Khan. If you do you know anything about Shahrukh?
I do not.
Yeah. Well, he is, again, like I said, just one of the most famous Bollywood actors that there is at this point. It's a type of celebrity fame that I don't think we have here in the U.S. anymore. It's kind of unexplainable, So, when Eid happens, thousands of people gather outside his house, and so they can just wait for him to come out on his balcony and wave. There's a sort of level of celebrity that maybe royalty and a few others may have, and so we were there to just sort of experience that. And we certainly did.
Will there be a third season of My Next Guest Needs No Introduction?
I do not know, Paul. I certainly hope so. I'm ready and chomping at the bit, so I don't have an answer for you on that, unfortunately.
If there was, who would you like to see Dave interview?
Oh boy, I don't. It's not, and I'm not trying to kind of avoid this question. I don't know who he should interview because it's really not up to me. It really isn't. So within meetings, I'd probably, have some opinions, but for here, I just don't, I think it's Dave will come up with his list and then we'll go from there.
So why do you do this? What's the purpose of the art you create? What motivates you?
What motivates me? Wow, that's a deep one. I have a deep love for filmmaking and, documentary work. And I like to make things where people actually feel something and enjoy watching whatever I'm doing or, watching whatever I'm sort of creating. So, what motivates me is just a love of filmmaking. I've been lucky to work at a place that allows me to, explore things that I think other production companies probably would not. And so, I don't know, had I not started working here, if I would have stayed in television necessarily, just because of the sort of limits on sort of creative expression. But I did land here, and yeah, it's a wonderful place to work. And so, just sort of pushing the boundaries of television as much as I possibly can. And, I'm sort of working in a place where they allow you to do that. So, yeah, it's just a love of filmmaking, love of documentary work, coming across real situations that people sort of can experience. Obviously, like the previous work that I've done, it's brought me around the world and dropped me in places that I never would have been otherwise. So it's not just work in a lot of ways. It's the experiences and meeting people and telling their stories. It sounds kind of sort of corny, but that's truly what motivates me. Otherwise I don't know what's the point.
Do you think there are any misconceptions about your career?
I don't know. Are there conceptions about my career? I suppose I don't know. I don't know what the conceptions of my career are to know what might be a misconception. I can tell you that I don't know. I don't know what people think about my career, or if people do think about my career. But for me, it's sort of unfolded in this really organic way, and it's a weird sort of road I've traveled over the course of the last 10 years at least. I've been doing it for 20 years, but these last 10 years have certainly pushed me in ways that I had never foreseen.
Are there any dream projects of yours that you'd like to film but you haven't yet?
Wow, you're getting into the idea phase. I'm sure there are. I'm just so in mode. We did 6 episodes of this show over the course of the year, so sitting down and thinking up ideas, and I don't have a lot of time to really explore, unfortunately. A dream would be just to go back to painting and just have a studio and live the life of an artist, but I don't think that's going to occur anytime soon. But yeah, so within television, no. I've really done what I think is some great work. Whatever sort of lands in front of me, I approach with the same sort of passion and heart and seriousness as any project. Whether it's with Tony or with Dave or whoever it is, and whatever the subject matter is, I just want, to make the most sort of creative and compelling show or film that I possibly can. Because everybody has, it's really just storytelling, and everybody has a compelling story if you really sort of dig in and, make yourself vulnerable and ask the right questions and sort of approach it with honesty. So, yeah, it really is whatever's right in front of me. If that's an answer.
Absolutely. Well, Michael Steed, thank you very much for spending time with us. I always like to give the guest the stage at the end. We just never know who's listening. For anyone who's tuned in, what would you say to them?
What would I say to them? I say, approach the world and people with as much empathy as you possibly can. Radical empathy is the answer to a lot of the problems that we're facing in the world. That's what I would say to them.
Very well put. Anyone out there, they can check out 0.0.com. Thank you very much for spending time with us.
Thank you, Paul.
All right. Until next time.
Pop, pop, doodly zing, bang, doodly knock, cock, cheep, da boo, bibbidi bata, gotcha, gee, da, po, pop, better like a teen. Oh, get a getting bad, oh, she like a patel to call a muckateen, luck upon, goodbye.